Yeah, the third leg.
So third leg, what we do is it's our kind of our pots and pans business. So sometimes the plant itself does not make sense to sell as a whole. Perhaps the technology has changed, but for that product, but the core process equipment is the same.
All right. Welcome back to the Last Bold podcast. And we have our guest, Ross Gale. We've known each other for a few years from international process plants. I always like to start off with like origin story of the family, where you grew up, and then we can go into, of course, the business, and then go from there. So, tell me a little bit about where you grew up. Where's the business today, if it's the same place you grew up, and tell me about the family and how everything started.
Absolutely, sure. So I'll give you kind of the high level rundown. So my family has been basically in New Jersey for, on my father's side, 5 generations actually. My mother's side, now 2 generations. But both sides of our family have been in the machinery business, believe it or not, going back several generations. My kind of keeping the story short, my mother's family's was in the machinery moving business in New York on Grand Avenue in Lower Manhattan, and you can still see the name Grand Machinery on one of the buildings that they were in. And my father's side of the business were traders, scrap metal business for a couple of generations. And my father and uncle, Ronnie and Jan, kind of the key to the story here. They started the business in 1978 after breaking up with my grandfather amicably, but
Family.
realized they couldn't work together. And it's the hardest and the best thing you can do. And they started a business pretty interesting. They saw an advertisement in the back of one of my grandfather's scrap metal magazines for what was called the mobile car crusher, mobile car flattener. And the advertisement said, free tickets to Dallas, Texas to check out this piece of equipment. So my father, who was at the time in the early, this is probably 74, he was just fresh out of high school, and my uncle had finished most of college, and they got on a plane to Dallas and went to go see this mobile car flattener. They get off the plane, and the salesman says, "I knew some young whippersnappers were going to take me up on the free ticket offer and screw me." And they were like, "No, we're serious. We're legit. Like, we're in the scrap business. My father's been in the scrap business," and they ended up buying this first mobile car flattener, one of the first in the country, and the first certainly in the Northeast.
What is a mobile? Yeah.
Oh, so it's basically when you have a junk car that's finished being reclaimed of its parts, if you even reclaim it of any parts, they flatten it. And the reason for flattening it is for efficiency purposes. So you can fit 4 cars on a truck that aren't flattened, but you can fit, I think it's 16 cars maybe or something like that on a trailer when they're flattened. So in order to get economies of scale to cover the transport costs to get that car to the scrap shredder, which were in major metropolitan areas rather, it didn't make sense to handle 4 cars. It made more sense to flatten them and handle 16 cars at one time. So what they were doing is they basically set up a traveling band, and we're going, places in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, some parts of New England that were, more than 100 miles from your nearest scrap processing shredder. And they'd go in and they'd buy, 2,000 cars, 5,000 cars, a couple hundred cars or something from small mom and pop auto parts yards. And they would transport them to Philadelphia, to New Jersey, to Boston, where they could get a lot more money for those cars because they flattened them. And we're paying, at the time it was like $1 a car to buy those cars, and they were selling them for $7 or $8 or $9 or $10 a car. So it was really, really a great arbitrage opportunity. Business evaporated because it became competitive, because everybody eventually got one of those machines and they kind of got pushed out of the market. And it was fortuitous because somebody had offered them some chemical processing equipment, and they thought they were just going to scrap it and take it out and junk it. And they ended up realizing that, hey, this equipment's in decent shape, we should try to sell it. So as any enterprising, young 20-something-year-old would do, they found a buyer. And so thus began the business of IPP. I'm skipping another business that they were involved in for reclaiming metals from the first mass burning station for power generation using municipal waste. They got in that business in between, which is also a very lucrative business, but ended up that this business was a better business for
before we
them.
get into the
And
business, I got a few questions. So it sounds like you're generations of entrepreneurs. Your mom's side of the business was moving machinery. So they were just in lower Manhattan. So were
yeah, they
you,
were.
when you say New Jersey, was it just outside of New York that you grew up, or what was this area?
No, so I grew up in central
Okay.
New Jersey, true dead center of New Jersey. So if you look at New Jersey as two
Hmm.
kind of halves with a little skinny
Got it.
waist belt,
Got it.
we're right in the
And
center.
so your mom's side, they were literally just moving machinery from one warehouse to,
Grand
got it.
Machinery was a trade. It was a trader of machinery as well. So they would buy machinery, they'd dismantle it, they'd move it out. So it was at the time textile equipment and
But
brewery
did they
equipment and that kind of
have,
thing.
how did they get into the business? Too
You're
many.
digging back too many generations. I don't
Got it.
really know how
Got it.
Grand Machinery came to be. It's a good question. I should see if
Well,
anybody in
my
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 mom's
same
side
question is
remembers the
always
story.
to try to understand, how people kind of, it's usually falling into the business. And so on your dad's side of the business, which several generations as well, um, how did they get into the scrap metal business? Like, what do you know?
Well, my grandfather, so his father left a picture at a young age, and he was responsible for caring for the family. So he started out in trading rags as a teenager. He was a middle school dropout, I think seventh grade, and started trading rags and then metals, and grew up a reasonably nice alloys trading business where he would go to all the factories in the central New Jersey area, Trenton, Camden, Flemington area, and towards the shore. And he had great accounts where he'd get all the metal scrap and would then package it up together in larger volumes and clean it up and remove contaminants. So you remove the iron from the copper and the iron from the stainless steel and nickels, and there was a lot of high tech manufacturing here on the Princeton area. RCA was a big account for him, so he when they were making a lot of satellite equipment and space age stuff, he'd get all that scrap metal. Much of which would be things that had to be witnessed
Hmm.
by the company as destroyed because they were
Oh, right,
highly
right, right. Well,
confidential.
it's a story always of, you're typically, entrepreneurs are always solving problems. They're also typically a good salesperson, where they're like, all right, I can figure out this problem, and then I'm going to go
Yeah.
figure out how to sell it. So then, as you kind of went through your story, uh, the your dad and your uncle. Now you skipped over another business that they eventually got into. I am curious.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
well,
there's been a lot of businesses.
just
I
trying
mean,
to figure out
it's a typical
what
entrepreneur journey,
worked
right? You
out,
have a lot.
until it doesn't. So, and I don't know if there's anything there, but I guess, what was it about this chemical equipment? Like, how does that even happen? Or is it just because you're just trading and then, oh, you know, well, there's something here, and I think I can resell this. But maybe I'm missing something, or if there's anything like relevant that some of the other businesses kind of, whether it was a relationship that got them that opportunity or something. Yeah.
I would say that scarcity was a driver for us to be in this business, right? Anytime you can be in a business where there's not a giant playing field of people that are sophisticated entities that are knowledgeable about the products that they sell in a very niche
Mhm.
market, is a pretty good business to be in. If you're selling ice cubes, for example, you know as long anybody with an ice machine can sell ice cubes. But if you're, in a pretty, in a field that requires speciality, requires technical knowledge, um, you have a pretty,
Hmm.
I would say, pretty secure business line. Certainly you always have to be growing and changing and pivoting. But if you're in a car flattening business where anybody can buy a car flattener and become an expert in car flattening, it's a very competitive space and it's kind of a race to the toilet. It's
Hmm.
whoever makes the biggest mistake is the winner. And in our business, and it's still to some extent true to this day, though the playing field has grown. Um, Players have specialized in packaging and other areas, but we've kept our focus. While we do go a pretty broad reach through what we call the process industries, we've managed to kind of carve our niche in the specialty chemical, pharmaceutical,
Hmm.
industrial chemical, petrochemical space. So we don't do any much with packaging. We won't do you know injection molding and finished goods manufacturing. I kind of use the story that if you look at a water bottle, plastic water bottle, for example, we don't buy and sell the equipment that makes the label or that makes the plastic a form for the bottle and that makes the cap, because that technology changes pretty rapidly, and it's hard to be a speculator and own assets for a long period of time in that business. But we focus on the upstream
Yep.
part, like the resin manufacturing and the petrochemicals that go into manufacturing the resins, um, and the paper making for the
Hmm.
giant rolls of paper, but not the label printing and the slicing to make that thin
So,
little
well, let
water
me
bottle
pause
label.
here for 1 minute as
Um,
we get into that before we get into IPP, because
yeah, sure.
what I also want to go back to is, was this piece of equipment like a large piece of equipment where they're like, hey, we can make some real money? And then back to your point, which is what being there's just a higher barrier to entry in when you sell something that requires a lot more knowledge. And that just means less people are going to spend and invest the time that is required to gain the knowledge to sell a product well and because at the end of the day, it's trust that you're building. Hey, if I'm an expert at what I do, then
Exactly.
you're going to trust that I can advise you in the best way. So
Yeah.
as I say that, it's not like you just get up one day and you're like, I'm going to be an expert at chemical processing. But one, I mean, that is a very broad thing to talk about. So tell me a little bit about like, how do they become even experts at this thing? And this is in the mid 70s,
Yeah, this is in the mid 70s. So IPP Group
78.
was officially founded in 78. Um, Through one of our predecessor companies. It was called Universal Process Equipment, but it's matured into IPP. So we were, I think, by nature, my father and my uncle are among the most curious people in the world, and they've passed on, I like to think, some of that curiosity to me. Um, I'm proud of the fact that I'm a business major and I know nothing about chemistry except for what I've learned on my own and learned from people who are smarter than me. So to the point is, being curious has afforded us the ability to surround ourselves with people who are a lot smarter technically than we are. And we've accepted the fact, you have to accept the fact that we're experts in our business, but we're not experts in the products that we sell. But we have to know enough about the products that we sell and know what we don't know about the products that we sell so that we can find the answers and direct our customers in a way that they can have
Mhm.
easy access to the answers. So what I mean by that is, if you look at uh, just in our previous engagement, Steve, about equipment sales, auctioneers are really great at sniffing deals, finding a deal, a liquidation, and making an offer, doing something really quick. They have a great eye for value, but where we kind of, I would say, exceed their knowledge is on the technical side and putting the effort in on the technical side. So if you're looking at, let's say, a generator, they may say that in the description, it just may say like 500 kW diesel generator. Now, for us, we go into way more detail. We talk about the efficiencies. We research, the fuel economy. We understand the hours, and we put all that stuff in our descriptions, so that a buyer who's an educated buyer and not a speculator, as an auction buyer, typically is a speculator. We give buyers enough
Right.
information to make a concrete decision as to whether that piece of equipment will fit for them. And if they can't make a decision based on the information we've given them, we will work with a technical expert who either is an employee of us or a consultant to us that can help get our customers comfortable with
Right.
making a purchase decision. So instead of being like I hate to use the term bum rush, but it's, an auction is a time sensitive purchase, right? You have very limited time to research. You may have no time to go see something in person. You may not be allowed to go see something in person anymore, since most of these auctions are, digital, online only, and you're just limited to the
Yeah.
information that's at your fingertips to make a decision. The difference between us and that is
Right.
is the depth that we go down
So,
to get our customers enough
let me
information.
preface to the audience two things. One, I want to touch on what curiosity allowed them to, like, how long that took to even learn the trade. When did they also expand out of just this like type of chemical equipment? But first answer, what does IPP do, right? And then we can kind of go through the timeline of, did you start to expand products, services, business lines? We can kind of then get to the point when you start to start joining the business. But first is, what do you guys do? And then second is
Sure.
kind of like, yeah, what did you start with selling? And then did you expand? How did the expansion go?
Sure. So I
Yeah.
guess what IPP does, I'll start from the top. So IPP has a business model with basically three legs to it. The first one is we buy and sell complete manufacturing sites in the chemical, petrochemical, pharmaceutical, paper, plastic, power generation, fertilizer, minerals processing, mining chemicals, food ingredients. And we'll look to take those facilities that are generally closed down by major multinational companies, and some percentage, roughly 20% of our business, is distressed bankruptcy type assets. And we'll look to repopulate those sites to use the existing infrastructure to make different products in most cases, but in some cases, with a restructuring, the same products or same family of products. And we'll look to, we won't operate those facilities. We simply buy idled assets, and then we'll look to repopulate those sites with other manufacturers. So our sellers are generally major multinationals, and our buyers are small, medium-sized enterprises, perhaps revenues up to $3 or $4 billion, but still perhaps under family control, where there's one person who realizes the benefit of making an economic decision to
That's a
buy an
nice,
asset
let's just
versus
pause
build an
there.
asset.
That's a pretty nice family business size, doing a couple billion. Okay. So that's what you're doing on one leg. And what's the second?
Yes. And that first leg, we have 20 sites
Mm.
that we own, mostly in Europe and North America,
How do you
across the
pause?
industries that
How
I
do you
mentioned
find
earlier.
those deals? Is
And
it
then
typically through these relationships with like banks? Because you said some of these are bankruptcy. How are you finding those opportunities?
we have we have a deal funnel that comes from every direction. We have a lot of internal business development that we use globally that helps us to find plants that are closing down, perhaps before they're announced. We have customers that call us because we've been in business since 1978, as I mentioned, and we've got a customer base of 160,000 companies globally that we've done business with or that we've had relationships with over the years. And as a result, we're kind of a known entity. And we also have a lot of things that come out in the news that we follow. So we'll pick out a news article that some so and so is shutting a plant down in New
I see.
Zealand, and
I
we'll
see.
we'll get
And
in touch with those companies.
why, um, and when, and I know we're going to get to these other parts of the business. Do you go outside of the US to, buy and sell these? And it's not easy because it's a different culture. It's, you know, well, who are we going to sell this asset that we've just bought to? Because that's not super easy. But what made you A, venture outside of the US? And then B, how hard is it? I mean, like, you get teams outside of the US to help you facilitate the trade and then figure out how to resell the asset, but that's not easy.
Sure. Well, look, I think also, as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship knows no bounds, right? So you don't stop anywhere. We are just opportunistic by nature, right? So we're always looking at flows in the market. We do a lot of reading to understand in our industry, where the comings and goings are. So we started going to Europe in the 80s, probably around
Oh, wow.
80, maybe 82, 81. Ronnie and Jan, my uncle and father, started venturing into Europe, doing some business in Germany, in West Germany at the time. And then, in the early 90s, when the wall came down, there was so many opportunities in East Germany, and we started to manufacture in one of our other businesses, glass lined equipment in Romania, with taking advantage of the fact that the wall came down and there was all of this privatization. Some crazy stories about getting involved in privatization of Eastern European companies. That's a whole other podcast. But uh, we uh, we we realized that, what we achieved in the U.S. in the at the time rapidly growing chemical industry and shifting chemical industry. We realized the same thing was going on in Europe and other parts of the world and Latin America. We broke into Russia in the late 90s, trying to do some business there, and actually
Yeah,
successfully doing some business in Russia. That didn't last very long, but it was certainly is the market of the future, and
right,
perhaps may
right.
may always be. Um, and we realized that, we could replicate what we do in the U.S. elsewhere. In terms of the complete plants, we probably do a third of our business with real estate and complete plants in the UK, and two-thirds in the US, and the rest of the world is the balance. So, we've done many successful deals in the UK, in terms of repopulation of sites and also redevelopment of sites. So not every situation doesn't make sense to restart a chemical plant, or I'll give you this example, a fatty alcohols manufacturing plant, in the UK, where, feedstock for that industry has changed to be palm oil from beef tallow. And last I checked, there's not a lot of palm oil grown
Right.
in the UK. So, um, we relocated that plant and we redeveloped the site. It was a really interesting site. It's very historic, dating back to the 1800s, and we preserved a lot of the old buildings and built a multi-purpose facility out of the property, residential, light commercial and light industrial rather. And we actually won an award from the UK Planning and Placemaking Association, which is a real estate development association. And things we're really proud of is revitalizing communities. I mean, for me personally, um, I really take pride in that every aspect of our business, which we haven't touched on the second two legs, but every aspect of our business is
Yeah,
about circularity and job creation, um,
right.
and job preservation in some cases. And, we're able to take communities that have been blighted when a plant shuts down, and 700 people directly lose their jobs, and probably another 1,000 people indirectly lose their jobs at the restaurants and the service providers around the area. And we we have an opportunity to repopulate those communities and bring life back to those communities. And I've seen it happen many times, and it's something that I feel passionate about as a community service that we do. That also helps us and our
Yeah,
customers,
I want to
but
touch on this
really
real
helps the
quick
community.
because the thing that gets well, Detroit's not a good example, but a smaller town that I mean, Detroit, this happened at a larger scale, but when you've got a plant in a small town where this plant is located, and potentially it was a multinational or a large company, and it deprecates that plant for whatever reasons economically, it's not viable. Unfortunately, they don't care about every single person in that community. Oh, got to shut it down. You guys are coming in. And first off, that's so hard to do, right? Is to, all right, we're going to stand this back up, put someone else in here, and help employ the community. But that community, it's not like they're going to go up and just move to the next town over. They've probably been around that community for sometimes decades. So generations. So very,
Generations.
very
I mean,
cool.
yeah, yeah. We see that time and time again. I mean, you're right. It is a massive disruptor. I mean, maybe not most, a large percentage of our manufacturing base in the US and even in Europe is centered around small towns that grew around that plant or around a few plants. And you watch the fabric of a town
Mhm.
in middle America,
Middle UK.
or,
Right. Right.
you know, Germany or UK evaporate and turn into, a town where there was once a traffic light and 20 businesses in an intersection, and it's almost like the old Route 66 story. That traffic light turned into a blinking light, and eventually they took the blinking light down and put a stop sign up because
Well, here's the
there's
thing
no
that people don't
traffic.
quite understand sometimes about economics is if this is 1,000-person town and 700 people lose their job, that they lose their job, and that means they can't spend elsewhere. The restaurants, the mom and pop stores,
Yep.
everyone else loses it. Right.
The
And
knock-on effects.
um, I didn't
Yep.
know that about you guys to do the full circle, and that's really that's awesome. Um, so let's talk about the other leg then. Well, the other legs, I should say.
Sure. So the other two legs, the second leg is where we'll buy a plant that doesn't make sense to operate in place. It's just, not every time can you strike and find an opportunity where a plant is still viable in that location. It's what I call a dislocated asset.
Mm.
It's a good asset. It's just in the wrong place. So, you like the fatty acid plant that I mentioned earlier. That facility is useless in the UK, but it's good someplace else. We'll take that plant, whether we own the land or not, and we'll redeploy that asset someplace else around the world where it makes sense to operate it. And that's where a real entrepreneurial flair comes in for our customers. So if you are in a business of making a certain molecule and it's going to cost you, let's say, $500 million to build, let's say, an ammonia plant, and you can buy a used ammonia plant and relocate it for 60%, 70% of the cost of building new. Perhaps it's not the most efficient plant in the world, but instead of taking 5 years to build a new one and $500 million, you can get it for $300 million installed and have it installed in two
Yep.
years. Time is money. And if you're trying to build a business and you can get that time to market advantage that your competitors can't get,
I
it's
was
a
just going to
really
ask you
big
because I
value
forgot
add.
to, but I'm glad you mentioned. So these size plants can be couple $100 million, and how big are they? I mean, or more, yeah.
Oh,
So
more.
can you give me the size and
Sometimes
scale?
more.
And I guess, yeah, you're right. If there's 700 people working at a plant, it's got to be decent size. So tell me a little bit about, because these are, I mean, thinking about not even the size, but the sophistication that you need to put together something like that is very difficult from an engineering, logistics perspective. I mean, that's wild. So, yeah, what is the typical size of these things? I guess it's a range, right?
There is no typical size. I mean, I gave you I
Okay.
gave you a large example of an ammonia plant. That's a big plant. Most plants in terms of physical size, are probably somewhere on the order of 5 to 7 acre plot of land
It's a lot.
that serves the plant. But some plants are 70 acres, just of buildings and equipment, and then of course all the ancillary buffer areas and such. I mean, I'll give another example. This facility we bought in the UK. Again, this is a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant.
Sure.
Bought it from Novartis and bought the land, the buildings, the equipment. It's the largest API pharmaceutical ingredient, small molecule chemical API manufacturing plant in Europe. It has over 1,200 cubic meters of reactor capacity. It's over 1 million square feet of building space across 3 manufacturing plants. They were making crazy blockbuster drugs. I mean, everything from Ritalin to
Soup to
to
nuts,
some cardiac
basically.
drugs. Uh, soup
Oh,
soup
they
to nuts
weren't
for the
doing, and they
ingredient
weren't
side. We weren't
packaging it.
making the
It was
physical, but they
just
were
the,
making the
wow, that had to be that big?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it's a 190-acre site. It's a massive site. And those kinds of facilities can get relocated, or they can be operated in place. And so kind of we cover, with the first two legs of our business, we cover the gamut of possibilities, right? So we we always try to operate a plant in place, sell it for operation in place, and or even lease it. So we do a lot of leasing of facilities for companies that are looking for a kind of a capex light step in model. So you buy the plant from us, or you lease the plant from us, and it's
A
at a
rent to buy
kind of a
model,
step in
kind of?
lease
Yeah.
basis. So exactly like a rent to buy. So you don't have to have the heavy upfront capital of buying a facility that has a 2 billion British pound replacement cost. You're paying a very small fraction of it to buy it from us, but even still, it's a lot of money um, to
Hmm.
lay out when you have no revenue. That's one of the ways where companies kind of trip up. Some of the larger public companies trip up is, they say, well, great, we can buy a plant. We can certainly afford to pay for a used plant. We can pay for a new plant, but we don't really want to buy assets. We want to buy businesses with capacity. So, what we're selling is an opportunity to create a business, not an opportunity to
Right.
buy an existing book of business. But entrepreneurs can see the value there. They can say, wait, look, I can pay 8 or 9 times EBITDA to buy a business that I could probably just create myself for a very
Hmm.
small fraction of that EBITDA number, by leveraging my own connections, my own existing business, and the
The
trust that I've
example that you
established with my
gave, now
customers.
I know that's a larger scale project with the fatty acid plant, ammonia plant.
The ammonia
How
plant.
long and how much planning goes into moving something like that?
The typical plant relocation will take anywhere from 4 months on a small plant basis up to 2 years for a large plant. That's for the dismantling.
Yeah.
I should go through the process. So there's a laser scanning
Mm.
to fully map out all the equipment. There's a match marking process where today everything is digitally barcoded as to what the location is against the drawings, so that nothing gets lost. It's almost like, Legos or an erector set when you're a kid. All the pieces are corresponding with a location, and then we take those assets and they get dismantled, packaged up, put onto ships and containers and trucks and trains or what have you, and shifted from point A to point B. So the largest plants, like a giant oil refinery, let's say, 150,000 barrel a day oil refinery, that might be a couple year dismantling project alone. And the installation part is the same as what it would be if you're
Which is
building a
how
new
long?
plant.
Which is how
By
long?
and large, it's roughly the same.
Depends.
Again, it's highly dependent. A rule of thumb is it can usually take 1.5 to 2 times the time it takes to
Wow.
dismantle a plant to
Wow.
install it.
Yeah, I mean, all the testing. Now, everyone's different.
But every plant is different. I hesitate to
General
give that
rules.
kind of number, but
Now, are you handling the
they're all variable.
logistics of
Yeah,
like the
sure.
shipping? And then I imagine there's so much regulatory stuff around this that I don't know if you're getting, I'm sure you have experts that are kind of directing traffic, but I mean, I just imagine the amount of regulatory stuff there is. And then, oh, I got to move it to a different country. That's probably a different regulatory framework, you know.
Yeah, so we get involved in the dismantling side and the logistics side when a customer needs us to. A lot of our customers are comfortable doing it themselves, but we always advise our customers. We have kind of a best practices guide of how to do this efficiently, because you can lose your shirt relocating a plant just like you can building a plant if you don't follow best practices. So, for example, you're not gonna take a used plant and try to turn it into the most efficient world class plant, because you will suffer death by 1,000 cuts. The goal is to get a plant running. So we help our customers and we advise them on how to efficiently do a relocation, how to handle the low hanging fruit from efficiency standpoints, how to ensure reliability and keeping up on maintenance of the plants and equipment. But in terms of the installation and construction, because we work in so many countries around the world, and construction EPC work is generally more of a commodity type
Is that
trade
engineering, procurement, construction?
where there's
Got it.
contractors.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Those construction companies, who will handle the turnkey package for the reinstallation generally are local in that country, and our
Got it.
customers usually have
Got it.
relationships with companies like that already. So they handle the
Okay.
construction installation
So,
side and the commissioning.
yeah, the third leg. Um, what, what do we do there?
Third leg, yes. So third leg, what we do is it's our kind of our pots and pans business. So sometimes a plant itself does not make sense to sell as a whole. Perhaps the technology has changed, but for that product, but the core process equipment is the same. It's the reactors and the heat exchangers and the chillers and the boilers and the generators that are
Right.
easily
The parts
translated
are worth
across
this,
industries.
perhaps
We
probably
we buy
greater
this.
than the whole. Depends on the situation. Okay, sure.
Depends on the situation, but sometimes. Yeah. We'll buy that plant and break it up into its individual pieces of equipment and process systems. That also helps when customers are in IP sensitive industries where they don't want to sell a plant as a whole, where a competitor can buy it for 70% savings on the cost of the equipment and engineering, and
Mm,
overall a 30% savings on the project, or 40% savings, and they want to take that capacity out of the market. We'll break it up into its pieces and agree not to sell them to competitors as a complete unit. So we keep a stock of 15,000 major pieces of equipment in our warehouses. So we have a 350,000 square foot warehouse in South Carolina on 200 acres, and we have two other facilities in Europe, in the UK, and in Germany, where we keep our inventory that's immediately available for customers. And this is all long lead item equipment. It's all equipment that takes months, in some cases
wow.
years, to order. So when you need something, you can come shopping with us and find what you're looking
15,000
for.
pieces across these three. Incredible. How, um, well, is the fourth leg though, this auction part? Cause I know we touched on that a little bit, but like this buying and selling, I get it. You're
Yeah.
stocking. And from what I know about the business, you get killed in the business when you don't buy right, when you overpay, right? Everybody can sell something.
It's the old adage. The old adage is, you
Sure.
buy it right, it's
Sure.
half sold.
Sure. So tell me about where the auction part then comes in to this part of the business.
Yeah, we don't really do very much in auctions. On occasion, certain equipment lends itself better to auctions, and we,
Okay.
we partner with auctioneers to do auctions for us. We generally don't do our own auctions. We've often explored doing our own auctions, but we've made the conscious decision that there are auction companies that are really good at running auctions, and they don't compete with us, and we don't need to step into their sandbox because we work closely with them on the buy side as well. So a lot of times
Hmm.
we'll buy assets at auction. So we
I
don't
see.
really see a need to get into that market. It's a very efficient market. It's a far more
Hmm.
efficient market than what we work in. Um, we we do have a lot of diversifications different than auctions. We've kind of taken a conscious step to becoming a full service provider
Okay.
for equipment, full stop. And what that means is we not only provide used equipment and buy used equipment, but we also manufacture new equipment now. So we've broken into that area. 90 something percent of all capital goods are new units. They're not used. So we've, instead of competing with our competition over a small percentage of the market, we've decided to branch into the new business. And our main differentiator in our two new equipment
Yeah.
businesses, one's called Gale Process Solutions, and the other one's called Universal Glass Steel Equipment (UGE), is that we actually stock equipment on a new basis. So things that we know our customers are always looking for, and we did a big market study on this, going back about 4 or 5 years ago when we first launched the business, for the new equipment. And we keep a very robust stock of long lead
Yep.
item equipment. So glass line reactors, for example, for the chemical and pharmaceutical industry. Those are generally 6 month to 12 month lead time items. We have at any given time 60 or 70 brand new glass line reactors in stock, from pilot scale size all the way up to
So what do they
6,000
do?
gallon sizes.
And
Uh,
well, I'll ask you the other question. Yeah, what is this specific for the audience? Because they probably doesn't know what that what that is or what it does. What does it do?
sure. So what a glass line reactor is a pressure vessel. It's a pressure tank with a giant mixer at the bottom. It almost looks like a fan, and you
Right.
do chemical reactions inside the vessel. And it's useful in the chemical industry, pharmaceutical industry. So for all of your small molecule drugs, your typical chemical pharmaceutical drugs like Advil, and most drugs on the market that are not biologics are made in a reactor. The ingredients are synthesized in the reactor. And this is a very specialty piece of equipment. It's a glass lined enamel coating on the inside of a steel vessel that allows for high corrosion resistance and high purity. So instead of having metal contamination, and when you're working with crazy acids, you don't have corrosion and erosion. The glass lining is a really durable
So that's
solution
gonna let
that's
me just
very commonly used.
summarize. To me, that sounds like it's gonna produce a higher quality product because there won't be any contaminants given that the glass is that right?
Correct.
Got it. Is that new?
Correct.
Or
Yes. And it's standard. It not only is it a higher quality
I
product,
see.
it's standard. It's been standard in the industry for high purity
Mm,
applications for 100 years, even more going back to the brewery days. So the original brew kettles were glass lined
interesting.
steel vessels, and then with the advent of stainless steels and other materials that are corrosion resistance, have corrosion resistance and high cleanliness or cleaning
We got a little
ability,
science
they
corner
switched to
here
stainless steels.
today. So you said you're manufacturing. Where are you doing that again? Is that in Europe or okay?
No, so we manufacture for GPS and for UGE. UGE has kind of two parts of the business. One is a remanufacturing business, and then the second part is the new all the new equipment we build primarily is built in India.
Tell me about that.
And
Yeah,
we
like how do
have
you? Yeah,
facilities there. Yeah, so we had a significant discussion on whether we build capacity in the U.S. or build capacity someplace else where we can still control the quality, we can control the process, we can control the designs using our European and U.S. standards and European and U.S. colleagues, but at a more competitive cost basis and also delivery time basis. And so we evaluated building facilities in Europe and building facilities in the U.S. And we ended up landing on working in India on a pretty capex light model for us, where we're exclusive. We have exclusive rights to manufacturing capacity for some
gotcha.
subcontractors for us, and that helps them to fill up their plants. So they have good domestic business, but they have some additional capacity that's available. We do a long term supply agreement where we say, look, you have you're using your facility 50% of its
Hmm.
capacity. We're going to buy the other 50% of the capacity at a price that's favorable for us, that we can pass on a lot of savings to our customers. But also, when they're building that equipment for us on speculation, we can have that equipment available for immediate delivery to our
Everyone
customers
wins there,
where our
right? I mean,
competition
like the
can't.
customer
And then also,
has cost
pardon?
savings that you can pass on. The manufacturing facility, for those who aren't very familiar, a lot of it has to do with balancing act of capacity. If you get too large of a warehouse and you're only operating half of the warehouse, you might have leveraged yourself given that you didn't pay for that warehouse in cash. You might have a problem not being able to pay for the loan in the warehouse because you're not producing enough from that facility. And so this is a perfect opportunity to say, hey,
Right.
these partnerships, I'm guessing, how did you build those? I mean, it's not like yeah.
We've had an office in India for
Where in
almost
India?
30 years, and our team there is incredibly diligent. Our
Rhoda,
office
okay.
is in Baroda, and our team there is incredibly diligent. It's in Gujarat. Um, Incredibly diligent and incredibly well connected in the chemical industry. And we visited a lot of
Mm,
manufacturers, not just in India, but globally, to try to find the right partners that would build our equipment to our specification with our quality standards, and B,
sure.
had great quality standards of their own and upward mobility in terms of capabilities, technologies, efficiencies. And we landed on a couple of partners there that are absolutely fantastic and build just absolutely world class equipment that, unless I told you
Right.
it was from India, which I just
Right.
did, you'd never know that it's from India. You'd think it was built
Fantastic.
in Germany or built in the US, and at a fraction of the cost of something
So
that's
I
built
want
in
to
the
talk
US or
about
in
those
Germany.
are the business lines. And I want to go from 70s and we can kind of fast forward a little bit about to when do you get in the business? And do you have any siblings in the business?
I
Okay.
do have siblings, none in the business. They've made the wise choice not to be in family business. It's a tough slog, but I wouldn't trade it for
Well,
anything in the world, and I'm happy
did
for
you
them
grow up
to
in
have
it
pursued their career
or
paths.
okay. Okay. So what age was
I did.
that?
I've been working here since I was riding a tricycle around delivering the mail. I mean, I for better or worse, this has
Hmm.
been like my calling in life. Uh, I I've never envisioned doing anything else, and I've worked here. I worked here through college. Worked here summers in high school. I started out, in some of my favorite memories elementary school and middle school with pushing a broom in the shop. I've really enjoyed coming up through the company. I think it's shaped who I am, understanding how all facets of the business work. And, you know, I learned a lot in college. I learned
Yeah.
way
It's
more
always the real world
on the
experience.
floor of the shop.
So 80s and
Yeah.
90s, kind of what happened and when did you kind of full time kind of
So
kind of
I joined full time around 2010. In the 80s and 90s, the business really grew a lot in the
sure.
chemical industry and pharmaceutical in the used equipment in the US and expanded in through Europe. We bought our facility in the UK and Germany in the 90s. We acquired another company in the UK and organically started a facility in Germany. And we branched into buying the industrial plants with the land
Got it. Because
in
you were
the
just
2000s and
basically
2010s
brokering and
aggressively.
offering this service prior to that.
We we were never brokering.
You were always
We
buying.
were never brokering. We were
Okay.
always
Okay.
buying on our own account. Yeah, yeah. We really don't broker. We buy for our own account. And then um we took the step
I
to
see.
start buying complete plants and even taking on environmental liabilities with the land. So that's kind of when since I've gotten involved, that's been the aside from the new equipment, the other big step that we've taken is getting comfortable with taking on environmental risk in
Can you tell
redevelopment
me
and
what do you mean by
development.
that? Like what does it mean to take on
Sure,
environmental risk when you buy the real estate? I mean, I can kind of imagine, but maybe you can enlighten me a little bit. Yeah.
sure, absolutely. When you're dealing with petrochemical manufacturing facilities, there are often heavy environmental liabilities from history. You know, back before the invention of the EPA, I think in the 70s, people used to literally put oil in the ground to filter it out and get rid of it. That's what you would do with your waste oil, and your chemicals would maybe go in drums and then into a landfill, and nothing was ever sealed up right and it was leaking. And, there was kind of a lack of, let's say, modern day environmental responsibility. A lot of those liabilities have kind of passed through acquisition, divestment of companies, even major chemical companies, household chemical company names. And at the end of the day, when that facility gets shut down, somebody is stuck with the bill to clean it up. Um, if we can get ourselves comfortable with the cost and the exposure of doing environmental cleanup, we'll take on that obligation. We're not going to sign ourselves up for a blank check deal, but we will sign ourselves up for something we can get our arms around and get comfortable
Got
with the
it.
risk exposure. And that allows us to kind of offer a turnkey solution to our customers, our sellers, who are in the business of making molecules. And this is something that happened 40 years ago. And they've been spending, a lot of money every year taking care of it. And they just want to be done with it. And we'll take that off their plates again if we understand it and can get comfortable with that risk. So that's a place where we've invested heavily, is in bringing in-house environmental capabilities and competencies in understanding how to evaluate properties and manage properties.
So how many across the 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 companies or the business lines, the different facility or different, offices across the world, how many employees do you guys have currently?
So we're actually pretty light organization across all of our operations. We are under 200 employees, about
I mean,
150
still, I mean,
employees
phenomenal. I
actually.
mean, I can even think about operating a 350,000 square foot warehouse, stocking, and you got to have a process. That
Well, that facility only has 12
that's
people.
awesome.
We're
That's awesome.
super lean and
So
organized.
where just kind of
Yeah,
it was segueing into just this sort of last piece of what I want to talk about is well, one question, I guess, how involved is Jan and your dad still in the business, if at all? And go ahead.
they are. Yeah, they are.
Okay.
They are absolutely still heavily involved. This is their passion. They love it. It's great that we're family, so we're all heavily invested in continuing the business and being successful. And I rely heavily on them for their experience to share with me and the team going into the future, as long
So
as they're
how do
interested
you
and able
think
to.
about this next chapter of the business being in what 46 years or some odd approach 48 years.
48 years.
What
Yeah.
does the next decade look like?
The next decade, I think, is going to be a period of extreme ebb and flow in the market globally. And I'm really excited for it. This structural change in Europe, as everybody knows, Europe is dead to the chemical industry. There have been some horrible decisions from policymakers in Europe that have
Mm,
basically killed the industry. And I don't view it as a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing for us as a business. It's a buying
yeah.
opportunity, and that capacity has to go somewhere. And Europe will have a rebirth of its chemical industry in a different way. The market will be a lot more selective about what it makes in Europe versus buys outside of
But-
Europe. Um, it's a natural process, and we went through the same thing, just even on a kind of a micro level. So New Jersey, was the chemical industry hub from the 30s and 40s all the way through the, let's say, the 80s, and then the cost of operation and compliance in New Jersey was so high, and development in New Jersey became so expensive that the industry got pushed out, and it went to the Gulf Coast, and it went to the Southeast, and New Jersey's had its own resurgence to some extent in life sciences. So things change, things move, and markets are efficient. So eventually, businesses that don't make sense in Europe are all going to close,
yeah.
and new businesses will take
Yeah, I
place.
see.
So we're really
Having lived in
excited about
Europe
that.
for almost a decade, it's kind not to be political, but they have deprecated a lot of their energy plants. Obviously, it's a similar vein with the
Oh yeah,
chemical and petrochemical plants, in that regulation is really stifling any opportunity to come into the market and build a business, and more red tape, more costs associated with that, more time. Yeah, it's really difficult to compete. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's a difficult one. Um, and then I guess for personal, any side hustles or any other interests that outside of IPP that you dabble in?
I do dabble in a couple of other things. We have a business that's called Universal Vortex, which is a natural gas pressure reduction technology that's also useful in LNG efficiency. So that's something I dabble in on the side a little bit. But my real passion is things with
Or you're a
motors.
car guy?
I love
What?
cars. I
Okay,
love
so what's
trucks,
your what are you
and
gonna?
I, I'm a serious.
Couple questions. What is your car of choice? Um, and okay.
I believe it's the car solutions, by the way. I think
All
there's
right,
no
give
one
me
car that's a
the
solution for
day
everything.
ride and
Um,
the everyday ride, and then the nice to have.
well, I'm in serious dad mode at this point in my life. So my boys are always with me. I really I travel a lot for work, of course, in the nature of what we do. But I make a concerted effort to spend as much time with my kids as possible. So that means dad's driving them to school, picking them up, and so I do
Nice,
have a station
nice.
wagon. I have a dad wagon. I have a Mercedes AMG E63 station wagon.
Riding in style.
That's my dad wagon. My daily driver is a
Oh yeah,
Rivian
how is
R1T
it?
electric
They're
pickup
coming
truck.
out with the
Um,
R2, like a more affordable. I think this
the
year,
R2,
right?
yeah,
I read something about. Okay, how do you like the
yeah, they
Rivian?
are.
I've never
Yep,
driven it or
it's
anything.
come out this year.
How is the
It'll be in
car,
Europe
the
next
ride?
year. Uh, Rivian is so I've owned a lot of cars. I've been blessed to have been interested in buying and selling cars my entire adult life. And during COVID, I was dabbling in buying cars. There's crazy arbitrage opportunities to buy and sell cars during COVID. And so I've owned probably about
Jeez.
100 cars in my life, and I've never had a daily driver as long as
Wow,
I've had my Rivian now 4 years, and it is I
really
have no
that
reason
good?
ever to change
Now,
cars ever again.
have you ever
It's
owned a
it's
Tesla?
just
Now,
fantastic.
I'm just curious,
Never owned a Tesla. I'm not an electric car guy. I
right?
don't think electric cars are going to save the world, but they are really fast, and for my use case of everyday driving, staying within
Hmm.
300 miles generally, it's perfect for me. I follow the ABCs of electric car ownership, always be charging. So it's charging out back in my office right now. It's charging when I get home. So I always have a full tank wherever I'm going. Um, I love having a pickup truck. It tows really well. It drives really well.
Hmm.
It's a sports car when you want it to be. It's an off-road monster. We had a terrible storm here a couple days ago, or yesterday actually, and we had a bunch of really big trees fall down, and all the roads around my house were blocked. I just went out with my pickup truck, put it in off-road mode, started like dragging trees,
Sure.
through the woods to get them out of the road. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
it was great.
Well, I am kind of curious before we end here. What do you know about Lucid or some of these new Chinese brands like Neo or BYD? And I know you're not a big electric car guy, but still, I mean, you probably looked at there's a place for right.
There's a place for everything.
What do you think
I
about them?
Yeah.
Hmm.
BYD makes
Hmm.
incredible cars, really cool cars. The fact that I can't buy one in the US, but
Hmm.
you can buy them pretty much anywhere else around the world kind of sucks. I've driven in several BYD cars around the world. I was in one that I drove one in Azerbaijan a few months ago. That was just like the nicest car for $40,000 that you could possibly look to buy. It to me was like it was an SUV. It was probably like the
Wow.
equivalent of a BMW X5.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was
How can
just
you compete
a
there with
really
the
nice
price?
car.
Well, Ross, as we
Yeah.
I'm not a
How
car
about
guy.
you?
I'm a watch
Are you a
guy.
car guy? Sounds like you're curious about.
I like watches.
You're okay.
What did
We can
is
talk
that a Baume
watches. We can talk
Mercier
watches.
there? Dude, I have the
Yes, it
moon
is.
phase. I got a gift from my wife. I have a not to be too flash. I have this guy I just got. Yep,
Paul Mercier,
yep. Um,
Skeleton. Um, I actually have recently become interested in watches built to a
okay.
quality standard and not a price. So there is a brand that I have bought way too many watches from. That is a revival of an old
What is the brand?
English watch, uh, and the brand
Sheffield.
is called Sheffield, and they are absolutely great, like
Really? And high
300 to
quality?
$500
Good
watches.
movement?
Super high quality, good movements, Japanese movements. I think a couple of watches have Swiss movements, and just really, really nice. I like changing it up, and I have some fun watches. I have
Nice.
some like really silly looking watches, um, and yeah, so it's funny we got that in common.
Well, I just
What's your
got
favorite
this, so
piece?
probably this one. I just started getting some in the last couple years. I My wife won't let me get it yet, but I am a fan of AP. Um, the very,
AP, of
subtle
course.
ones. But I just think they're gorgeous watches. So
Yeah,
no, I'm not.
I don't like too flashy watches. I like
No,
silly watches, but not the ones that are
no.
like
I
blingy, flashy.
I mean, I usually wear like black and white clothes with no brand.
Sure,
But watches I love, but I like the low profile. I like IWC a lot because like they build great
that was just a great
watches,
watch.
but and great price point. So, but yeah, sure we could talk watches a ton.
Cool.
Well, listen, I really appreciate
Yeah,
your time. It's been great having you on here today, and um, yeah, I know we've known each other for a little bit of time, but you know, it's
yeah. Oh, great to be on here and share our company story and
yeah.
what our
Well, let's
entrepreneurial
keep
journey
grinding.
has
All
been.
right,
I think you did
go ahead.
ask one other thing and I didn't answer. What I see the future for our business, growing into some different verticals is another thing we're looking into. Staying within the manufacturing space, but
Like
there's
what?
some other verticals we're looking into. Um, some other specialty applications like doing more in biologics, biochemical fermentation. We're also exploring opportunities to get involved in
Oh
more
wow.
operation of plants. Not bringing the operation expertise to ourselves, but finding an operating partner that really knows the business and maybe doesn't have the capital for the asset, and we put the asset up and we work
See,
together to grow the business.
that's cool. I mean, like,
We don't want to we don't ever yeah it's an important part of what we're working on. So we have a couple of opportunities or a couple of projects that are in advanced stages in that regard. And I think that is a place where we can really shine because look, we have more assets than many
mhm.
many chemical companies do in their entire portfolio of operating facilities. The only thing is ours are not operating. So if we can figure out how to take our facilities that are not operating and get them operational and keep a participation in those assets, we can really build a nice business. And one of our key interests is in the biospace, the biochemical space, because I think that's the future, and that's the only way that Europe will survive in the chemical industry. For example, is by
Yep.
participating in the bioeconomy. There are so many pathways now to make things like even narcotics and lubricants, all from a bio base, where the product is a drop-in replacement
Hmm.
for the
Well,
conventional
I also, just to touch on
molecule.
where AI has gotten anything in biochem and where it's going
Yeah,
is I think we're going to be able to, one, save a lot of lives, but two, just like be able to, from a capital standpoint, be a lot more efficient with how we execute our product that we want to, produce. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And, you know,
absolutely. I mean, AI is 100% transformative for every business, and if you're not
there we go.
following AI and you're not
Hmm.
using AI in your
Yep.
business,
Yep.
you will be in trouble. And it's
One.
not a
Right.
matter of if, it's a matter of when. So my recommendation to anybody listening to
Right.
this is learn about AI. Get in touch with it if you're not already using it in your business. I don't care if you're if you have a hardware store or if you are in a big tech business, you have to be using
Yep.
AI to
Amen to
grow your
that.
business.
Ross, thank you very much.
Yes,
And
sir.
till next time, man. Thank you. All right. See ya. Bye.